Again, I'm Farah Warner. I also wanted to very much thank Angela Evans from Solutions Journalism Network, who is our great partner in bringing you these trainings. And then I'm going to turn it over to Yumi Wilson, a longtime friend and colleague, who is going to be our trainer for the session. So Yumi, it is all yours now.
Thank you so much, Farah. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see what pops up. Always fun. Okay, so I know we have only an hour and lots to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. First, I just want to thank Farah and Metcalf for putting this event together in partnership with the Solutions Journalism Network. It is, I think, appropriately titled Covering the Planet with the Tools That Tax It. Because it's quite the quandary, if you will. You've got AI being used by newsrooms and many journalists, as we will soon learn. A poll was taken. So yeah, lots to cover there. This is specifically designed for climate science and environmental journalists. Okay, so here is a big number to consider: 17,000 cars. That is training grok, estimated emissions equal to about 17,000 cars for 1 year. So, we can, I'm just going to kind of move the pictures a little bit. So I won't be able to see the chat box. I think what we're doing is holding off on questions until the end. If anyone wants to chime in and say that's okay, is that correct? But I'm going to move through the information I'd like to share, and then we'll have time for questions. Okay, so what is this hour about and what is it not about? I just want to be very clear. I'm a longtime journalism professor. I used to work at the San Francisco Chronicle and the Associated Press. I went to USC for journalism. So I'm not coming through as a tech person, but I have learned a lot about technology in the last decade or so. So what is this session about? It's a practical session. It's about your reporting and how AI is impacting journalism and possible practical applications, if you will. It's built around documented case studies, and it will show you what some newsrooms and journalists are doing. And I want to be as transparent and honest about costs and limitations. This is not an AI pitch to use tools. This is not a pitch to not use the tools. And this is not about which tools you should use. So the agenda, we're going to be talking about AI in newsrooms like the New York Times and Reuters. We'll also be looking internationally at what outlets in Denmark and other places are doing. We'll look at the material costs, which I'm going to guess that some of you already know about, but we'll go over some more numbers. The epistemic costs, there are a lot of failures that are happening and flaws, if you will. And the framework that I've been working on for a couple of years. It's called CCR. There are lots of different prompt frameworks, but this one I think will help in terms of addressing some of the concerns and questions that you have today. From the pre-survey, it looks like about 80% of you already use AI tools in some way. I know that there are a couple of you who are very skeptical. I teach at SF State, and I can tell you a lot of students, and I don't know how many of you have seen the social media little snips and clips about students booing speakers at graduation ceremonies. So there is definitely a pushback growing, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens next. Having said all that, let's look at how AI is being used right now in newsrooms. And let's look at what works well when they are being used. So even though these AI tools can do a lot, they can crunch numbers, they can figure out patterns, they can give you a source list in seconds of time. I think the important thing is they are not, they're kind of like teenagers. I think I said this to Farah when I was at the Online News Association a couple of years ago. It's kind of like they have a lot of information, but you kind of have to guide them. You have to oversee them. You have to go, you're wrong constantly. So humans do need to stay in the loop. And number two, the tool is built or chosen for the task. So there are lots of tools out there, lots to talk about AI agents, but really kind of figuring out what is best for you. And then three, the newsroom keeps control of its data. And we're seeing this increasingly, especially when there is a budget. Newsrooms are choosing to use large language models, but using them within internal servers. So there is some protection, and I'll show you some examples of that. The other number I want to talk about, we saw in the pre-survey there was about 80% of the people polled who use AI in some way. That actually aligns with the larger research reports that have come out. Muckrack, State of Journalism, March 2026, found that about 82% of journalists reported using AI tools in some way. ChatGPT currently is leading the way at 47%, but the interesting data point here is Claude is doubling year over year. I know that based on certain things that have happened in the last 6 to 8 months, a number of people are moving from ChatGPT to Claude. Again, I'm not here to advocate tool usage, which ones, but I'm just here to point out the numbers. And the reason I'm kind of learning so much about the numbers is I'm writing a book for Cognella, an academic publisher, called Journalistic Thinking in the Age of AI. So I'm learning more than I ever thought possible as we speak. And the other thing I think we have to acknowledge about AI is that the numbers are changing every single day. I have never seen tools change so quickly. You know, when we think about technology in the last 20 years, for example, the way that AI has changed. In terms of usage, this is a very short list. The New York Times, we're going to talk a little bit more about what they do. The AP, they've been doing it for probably close to a decade, if not longer, automating earnings reports, partnership with OpenAI. And AP isn't the only one with partnerships. At the same time, a number of newsrooms have filed lawsuits. They are also doing partnerships with Perplexity, with OpenAI, with Anthropic, which oversees Claude, and a number of AI tools, AI products, AI programs and companies. So it's really important to note that there is this kind of traction and friction, if you will, and yet we see kind of partnerships forming for various reasons, which we can talk about too. Reuters, Bloomberg, Washington Post, in-house AI assistants for routine drafting, Financial Times, Economist, Zetland, Magna, custom-built tools for privacy. So let's look a little bit more closely at the New York Times. They have AI as an investigative infrastructure. So they have appointed an 8-person team as of 2023. And what they've created is an AI tool that helps reporters deal with large data sets that probably would have taken more than a lifetime to go through. And some of those examples include leaked Zoom calls, Dr. Oz's media appearances, the big one, Epstein files, Syrian prison records, and so on. And the Boston Globe and a number of other newsrooms have actually won major awards, including Pulitzers, for using some form of AI tools, automation, data crunching to help analyze a large set of data. So what Zach Seward said of the New York Times is, quote, treat AI output with the same suspicion you would a source you just met. And I think that that is the reality that we are in, even though AI will give you answers and it will be, you know, so certain, right? When it gives you the answers, reality is they're kind of making up as they go. And we'll talk a little bit more about hallucinations too. So when we look internationally, we can look at some Danish cases. Good Tape, I know a little bit more about because Zetland Media owns Good Tape. In fact, Zetland Media, which is a journalism organization and newsroom that's growing in Denmark and some other places, they decided that, hey, instead of using Otter AI or Firefox or even Rev.com, these are all transcription tools that I have used, that many journalists have used. They decided to create a transcription tool that is built by journalists for journalists. So instead of using the tools that were already out there, what this newsroom did is say, hey, why don't we take the technology and create what works for us? And what works for the journalist, it started at Zetland, but now it's being used all over the world, is let's create a transcription tool that does not own your data, that does not share your data with a large language model, which some of those other transcription tools. And as the people who run Good Tape and the people who work at Zedlin told me is, you should read the fine print of rev.com or Otter AI very, very closely to make sure that your data is not going into the atmosphere out there and being used to train, or that they own it. So they are now making $3 million in annual revenue. They have 2.5 million users in 190 countries. And I bring this example up because I think one of the things I think journalists in newsrooms could be doing is looking at the technology and then figuring out products and tools that are specific and geared toward journalists, so they are not having to use whatever mass product is out there. Another example is Magna, and a coalition of Danish news organizations and universities built their own AI assistant. AI assistants are, I think, the big new wave. They are able to do things on their own after direction, but there are a lot of dangers with that. And so, yeah, that's something to consider, and we can talk about more. So 3 patterns, 1 through line. I think the most important thing right now is, even though AI can do a lot, humans must be in charge. I think about The Matrix, the movie, and I think once we lose control of these amazing AI tools that, Demis Habib, who won the Nobel Prize with his team, he works at DeepMind at Google. But what he said is that while these things can do great things, like maybe solve climate change, cancer, and other big things, I think the important thing is to not let these tools take over. And we can actually see some examples of AI agents, for example, going rogue. I don't know how many of you have heard about that, but there are examples of, when these tools become what they use, this is the language they use, is as smart as humans. That's what they're calling AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which most people say we have not reached yet. But if it does that, then it is able to think like a human, be like, I'm not really sure, but artificial superintelligence is what some theorists are believing that if we get to, would then be smarter than the human. Right now, we're in a phase called ANI, which is artificial narrow intelligence, which is why human oversight is so important. The tool is built, the other thing I think the pattern is, the tool is built or chosen for the tasks. So thinking about why you're using these tools and how they are helping, and choosing which tools will do that. And we're going to kind of look at that more. And then the newsrooms keeps control of its data. And that's why I think internal servers, and that's why I think even having the discussion, if newsrooms aren't having the discussion, there's this thing called shadow AI. And I don't know how many of you have heard of that, but it's kind of like when people individually are using AI because their newsroom or their company is not talking about, AI. They don't have a policy. And so they're kind of doing things on their own. And we can see examples of how that is not a good way to go either. The newsrooms doing well are those that are treating AI as a journalism infrastructure, not as a magic shortcut. In fact, I'll just say very quickly, anytime you think, well, I'm going to jump on an AI tool and I'm going to get this result very quickly, there's something wrong with that. The first answer you get, I've said this before, is garbage. Any output at the beginning is basically kind of like someone spinning, talking out the side of their mouth, and you have to spend time, maybe hours, maybe even days, refining and getting to what you really want and need. The good news is that experts, such as journalists, if you're using these tools, what is good and what is bad, what is wrong and what you need. And so when I think about AI usage, for among my students, for example, they're not up to speed on what journalism should be and what the nut graph is, what the lead is, what ethical considerations to consider. So I think there is more danger when experts are not using these tools, or when you're using these tools without the expertise or knowledge. One investigation that shows patterns. Reuters and Stanford's climate cash investigation tracked where $100 billion in annual climate finance pledges actually went. AI helped them build a searchable database. And I think that's another kind of benefit to using some of these tools. We can see with, for example, the Epstein files, where a number of regular people went into the database and then pulled what they wanted or what they were interested in, and then wrote and talked about those angles, if you will, on the story. And this is what Climate Cache can do. It's a searchable database for individuals to go on in multiple languages. And what they found is they found $4.7 million in chocolate and gelato stores across Asia, a Marriott in Cap Haitian, a coal plant in Bangladesh, and the film La Tierra Roja. 5 projects totaled $2.6 billion. So, this is AI as accountability journalism, taking a stated solution apart. A solutions journalism use of the same tool would flip the question and look for positive deviance. All right, let's talk about the material costs. The numbers are real. 72,816 tons of CO2. That's what it takes to train emissions for AI's Grok 4. 12 million people drinking water needs that GPT-4o inference may exceed annually, and 1.5% of world electricity. Global data centers in 2024 projected to more than double by 2030. We can also, I'm sure some of you have heard or even written stories about the data centers themselves and how people are starting to push back against them and starting to say, no, not here. So that is one of the big concerns when you think about AI usage. So how do you kind of come to terms with using AI, but knowing it's taking a lot of energy? One thing to do is think about the queries that you input into any of these AI tools. They're not all equal. So example is a single text query that would be equal to a microwave for a second. A generated image would be like charging your phone, and a generated video is hundreds of watt hours. So carbon emissions from the least efficient inference models are over 10 times higher than the most efficient. So basically, what you ask in terms of output will generate a different amount of electrical or energy needs. And when you look at ChatGPT, it needs a lot more water, intensive cooling, and default data privacy trains on input unless, let's just look at energy for a second. So higher, Claude, lower estimated wattage, Gemini, median text prompt about, so we can see there 0.24, and then DeepSeek. DeepSeek is an AI tool that is created that's produced by China. And so we'll get to why a lot of people are not using DeepSeek, but DeepSeek is actually architecturally efficient. It uses chips, but the way it uses chips reduces the energy consumption. Then we move to data privacy. That's another big concern. ChatGPT, if you're using it and you haven't changed the settings, it is training on your data. You would have to go into settings to change it, and I'll show you in a second. Claude does not train by default on your input. Gemini trains on your input unless you, again, go into settings and change it. And DeepSeek sends the data to Chinese servers. So as journalists, I would say for the most part, turning off, the training part, which is what I do, toggle off to not train the model. Claude already does not train the model. Gemini, you got to change the settings, and then DeepSeek, because it's sending it to a different country and all of that stuff, I would say that's probably the reason to avoid it. Having said all of that about the settings, it is important to remember that, as journalists brought up, I think when I did go to the ONA conference, is that um, even if you turn off the trainings, don't train the model. The fact is they do have your data. So the question is, what do they do with your data? How long is it stored? We can see examples of data that was stored and then pulled from because there was a lawsuit, so they wanted to look at that data. So I would say it's not 100% guaranteed that your information is private, even if you change the settings. How do you change the settings? So on ChatGPT, you would go to settings and go to data controls and then turn off what they call improve the model. I love the language. They improve the model for everyone. Turn that off. Claude, help improve Claude, already off. And then Gemini apps activity off. So 5 habits that move the needle. First, based on what you want, let's say you're asking everyone, actually, people are using ChatGPT for almost everything now. So let's say that you are in another country, you're traveling and you need some travel tips. You might choose the lighter model because it doesn't have to do heavy lifting or thinking. You know, that is one way to reduce the energy consumption. The other thing that you could do, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about, is writing a clearer prompt the first time around so that your output from the very beginning gets you closer to where you want to be. Another thing is when you create images or ask AI tools to create images and video, that takes a lot of energy. So that's another thing to consider. And then batch your questions. One well-built prompt with 5 sub-questions costs less than 5 sessions. And then turn off training data sharing. Doesn't cut energy directly, but it protects your sources.
Hey, Yumi, just to
Yeah,
jump in, we do
yeah,
have one quick question in the
yeah.
chat from Michael Bass. What do you think of the emergence of AI tools for Earth observation, like Earth Index or Clay? These are not generative LLMs, but are purpose-built for environmental journalists and defenders to search the surface of the planet, satellite imagery to find illegal coal mines, deforestation, etc. Not sure if you have insight into that or not.
I would have to look into that, Michael. I do think that there are different tools without knowing much about what you're talking about. And I have to do research on it. But the reality is, when we talk about AI, most specifically, I'm talking about generative AI. But there are other AI related tools that are more about automation or more machine learning. So I would have to look into what it is when it does the observation to be able to answer your question. Hope that helps. Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit about material costs, meaning what is it doing to the environment? What is it doing to our privacy? But we also want to look at how, when we are not looking closely at what AI puts out or produces, or when you have cases of shadow AI usage, right? Because no one is talking about it. I don't use it. Everyone says I don't use it. Like my students, I don't use it. But then when I run their content through a verification tool like Pangram, they did use it. It's just that people aren't talking about it. And I think what's happening is we see these type of cases: reporter fired after AI tool fabricated quotes attributed to a real person. And this person, Benj Edwards, he is really experienced. I mean, if you pull him up right now, if you're online, just look up his name, Benj Edwards. You can see he's high profile, he's done a lot, but he made that mistake, which is he used a Claude code based AI tool to extract source material while working from bed with a fever. And the tool fabricated quotes attributed to open source maintainer Brennan Shambaugh, who never said them. And that's the thing about AI. So my area of kind of research is around generative AI. And when we think and look at generative AI, the very definition of generative AI is I am going to generate a response for you regardless. So to me, quotes are very dangerous because even if you put in a draft and say, here are my quotes from this interview that I got, and I want to create a structure or an outline around it for my 60-minute documentary, you have to check to see if the generative AI tool has changed your quotes. You also have to instruct it not to do it. But even if you instruct it, it may still do it because that's the nature of this particular tool in the phase that we are in, which is narrow intelligence. It thinks you want a better response, a smarter response, a different response. Yeah. And that's one example. There are more.
Yumi, just a
Yes,
quick
go
note.
ahead. Yeah.
So Nancy is asking if you could please repeat the name of the verification tool you have used.
Yes, absolutely. It's become my best friend. PAN, P as in Paul, AN as in Nancy, GRAM as in Mary. It's called Pangram Labs. And I had the opportunity to interview the co-founder, a guy named Max Spiro, young person who went to Stanford and got his master's in AI engineering. He's worked at Google, Turo, and some other places. But he started this company because he realized that he and another person started this company because what we're really seeing across the board is a lot of AI written material in our social media, on websites, and elsewhere. And I'm not saying I'm not here to judge, but all I'm saying is what Max discovered is a way to input content to then figure out how much of that content was generated by AI. And different from Grammarly, they also have an AI verification tool. Pangram uses a number of factors to determine why it's AI. They look at patterns. They look at certain language choices that AI tools tend to make. And so they'll give you a percentage, everything from 100% human written to 42% AI assisted to 100% AI generated. And so now I use that tool all the time. And even if you use just like, let's say you use a copy editing tool like Grammarly, maybe to check your grammar, and I certainly do. And if you're even doing like Google emails, Google has the polish option. And what's interesting about Pangram is even if a tool just helped you figure out where the comma goes and fix your grammar, your spelling errors, the Pangram tool is able to detect that you were assisted by grammar. And again, no judgment. It's not wrong or right. In fact, I would like somebody to help me with, when I'm writing fast and making mistakes, I would love to send out an email with that looks good to the other person. So they're like, what is Yumi saying right now? But Pangram has been really accurate. In fact, if you were to go on their site, you'll see they have data that shows that the universities and the publishers that are using them, the accuracy rate is quite high.
Yumi, last question
Yes.
on this, and then
Yeah.
I know you want to get going. So Nancy is asking, when using Pangram, does it retain the material you have asked it to check?
So yes, it does. It works and looks a lot like ChatGPT. It holds it in history. And so like if you look on the left-hand column, you'll see a number of your, anything that you put in there. You would have to go into settings to see like if they're using it. My understanding is they're not, but I'm saying that off the top of my head, and I would have to look very closely at that to see if they're using it. But when I talked to Max, I'm trying to remember, it's been a while. I think he said it does not train an LLM, but it does restore or does store your data. And I find it very helpful because I will go back to my history and look at, anything that I input, a month ago, 2 months ago. Yeah. So,
Thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so there are other cases of like when AI goes wrong. So, hallucinations. I'm sure that most of you have heard of this term. I know some of you have never used AI, but hallucinations, I think, are really where we are right now, where we are at. And it's really because generative AI, it doesn't think, but its task is to generate a response no matter what. It doesn't ever say, hey, I'm not sure. Can I get back to you on that? Right? It might take more time thinking, but it always gives you a response. the response. And the problem with that is it means it can invent things. In fact, it does a lot. AI invents papers, authors, journals, people, statistics that sound very real. And the reason is because parts of that statement are real or are based on something they pulled, but parts of it are not. That is the hallucination. It kind of riffs, it kind of goes a little crazy. Example here is Deakin University in November 2025 using ChatGPT 4.0. It fabricated 1 in 5 academic citations, and 64% of fake DOIs linked to real but unrelated papers. And that's the problem with academic research, right? Which is, you put out a paper whenever, and now people are citing your paper because it's supposedly peer reviewed. It's been through a lot of, scrutiny. But when you're using AI and you're not doing the scrutiny yourself, it is very possible that you have included citations and other information that is wrong. Smooth uncertainty. Uncertainty number 2, the AI rewrites probabilistic findings as definite ones. And that is absolutely true. I think perhaps the AI tools are being trained by people who want these tools to sound efficient and effective and so on. But the problem with that is then, Royal Society, Open Science, April 2025, 26 to 73% of, overgeneralization across 4,900 summaries, prompting for accuracy made it worse. So, yeah, another problem. Number 3, retraction blindness. The AI cites retracted papers as authoritative, unaware they've been withdrawn. And that is a major problem because ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, and the list goes on, they don't have access to the world. They don't have access to some newsrooms that have banned or restricted their content from being pulled into, let's say, ChatGPT. So what ChatGPT is now making choices and giving you answers based on what it does have. And that's the problem, because it's basing its answer on what little or restricted data it can get. And it's not going to be able to tell sometimes that things have been retracted or corrected. It might pull from a URL that's 3 years old. That's another thing. Definitely check when you're pulling sources. Sometimes it will go to really old sources, and sometimes that's great because maybe you're doing a 5-year pattern study and all of that. But certainly, as ChatGPT came out in late 2022, and then as people started using it in 2023, one of the biggest problems back then was almost all of the data was old. It has improved now. It can get mostly current information, but I think this is what I always tell journalists. AI can find everything, even like up to today, what was reported today, if it has access to it. But it cannot report what has not been told, has not been shared. And that's where we come in, because our work is to be out there interviewing people, talking to people, finding new information. And AI cannot do that yet. Hopefully never. But that is something to consider. And number 4, confident wrongness on contested science. AI states positions on debated questions as settled. And again, I think this is, whoever trained these models, they're training these models, they probably want these responses to sound, like, yeah, when you come here, you're going to get the answer of the century. And so, maybe we need to have discussions with the developers themselves and say, why do you have to seem so assured? How can we change these LLMs so they can show a bit more skepticism? Now, I can train the model. There is a thing where you can train models to be more skeptical. You can go into custom settings, for example, in ChatGPT and say, I am a journalist. I want you to cite every source you give me, because by default, it doesn't do that. I am skeptical. I do not want you to agree with me, but it's constant learning. It's constant training of these models. Why science and environment is harder for AI. I think this reminds me of when I was in Laos on a Fulbright, and there I assumed everybody used ChatGPT, but everyone there told me they don't because ChatGPT hasn't been trained on the Lao language. They use Gemini because it's a better choice. And so when we're thinking of specialties or areas where there isn't a lot of knowledge and shared understanding, I think it's hard for AI models in general. So when we look at science and environment, we've got some problems here. Training data is contaminated. Denialist sites, industry disinformation, advocacy framing presented as research all can show up if a tool has access to it. For example, a lot of AI tools have access to Reddit and they use Reddit to make decisions about, yeah, this is, absolutely true, or this is not true. So there's some flawed data. If they're being trained on this, we've got a problem there. Science is genuinely contested. So AI flattens methodological debate and evolving evidence. Stakes of getting it wrong are high. A miscited PFA stat in your community water is dangerous. Sources see it before editors do. And 4 defenses that work. I think so. As we think about all the challenges that science and environmental journalists, journalists have, if you understand that from the beginning the data is flawed and the generative AI tool is just going to give you what they think you want. And I'm going to actually, when I talk about prompting, there is a way that Subu Vincent, who's at Santa Clara University, said to me that we can do so the AI doesn't begin to hallucinate or give us those terrible outputs. So we'll talk about that. There is some control within us. So some of the things that work: verify every named source, treat AI citations as leads, not facts. So in the older days, right, like 5 years ago, we would go to Google and then we would find articles and then we would open that article and say, okay, well, this is by Forbes, so we're good, right? And I think there's a little bit of that habit when we go into an AI tool. We go into ChatGPT and we go, I'm looking for, the latest weather patterns in this region. And I want you to cite the sources and give me articles. So we're assuming that the AI tool is doing exactly what we've asked and giving us the output we exactly wanted, because that's what Google did. That's what search engines like Bing and Yahoo did. But ChatGPT and AI tools, as they are currently, do not work like that. They take in what the information they want, whatever they can find, and they give you a response that they think you want. And so what we have to do is go, wow, this is a lot of good data, but then we have to read through it. Then we have to get others to check it, humans. We have to treat, so for example, I'm working on a book. And one of the things I asked is like, okay, I've got to write these APA style footnotes for every factoid. And I was thinking, okay, let me ask Chat to write the footnote for me because they already have the format, which they did. But the problem is even the footnote has inaccuracies. So while it helped me kind of get the footnote going, I have to then go back and check the footnote and check the URL and check the date. So it doesn't necessarily slow down my work. I think of it more as like an assistant or a partner where I'm like, okay, I'm getting feedback. I need these footnotes. And now I'm going to do the work, which is to find out the footnotes. I will say that I'm starting to make a kind of slow progress back to doing it myself, because it just takes more time in a sense, because you do want to verify every fact or source that you get. You can also ask the AI to flag its own certainty. This is actually one of my biggest tools that I use. So even with this presentation that Claude and to some degree ChatGPT and helped with, it was like, okay, well, I like the way this looks. The headline, why science environment is harder, 4 defenses that work. What I do is I will say to Claude, fact check your results, and almost every single time Claude will say, you're right, I did get this wrong. No, this is even a better suggestion. Go to a different AI tool and say, Claude created this headline and these facts, these 4 defenses. What are your thoughts on it? And be as general in your question. We're going to talk about that more in prompting, but try to avoid subjectivity in your prompt. Because when you say, I think Claude got it wrong, then ChatGPT thinks, and not thinks, but understands that this is what you think. So your response is going to match. And that's why people go, oh, well, it's like an echo chamber. It's a lot of times it's our word choices. If we ask it more from a scientific perspective of what are your thoughts, and then I'll even add in, if there are no problems, I don't need to know. So that's another thing that you could be doing. Ask the AI to argue against you. A lot of times, pressure testing ideas, counter, like what's the counterpoint on this? And then you use AI for pattern recognition, not pronouncement. What angle should I consider? What's true? One that doesn't trust and confident sounding AI more. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about prompting. I'm not sure how okay. So it's 9:43. By the way, I think these slides are going to be available, Farah, to people, to those who have made the call and maybe those who
We
haven't.
will provide the slides, an
Perfect.
executive summary, and also a recording. So yeah.
Okay, great. So the reason I say that, because I don't think we're going to get through everything here, but basically, when we looked at energy consumption and we saw that a better prompt from the beginning, where you ask more of what you want from the first get-go, can actually save energy. This is one way to do it. Creating a prompt that kind of addresses a lot of different perspectives. So number one, I call it the CCRI model. So first thing is clarity. Ask for the types of sources. But here's the thing: if you want to avoid or reduce hallucinations, don't ask for the names of people. It's going to say, I want to know from Dr. So and so, that he said this. It's going to be more likely they're going to find something or not, and they're going to say what you want to hear. Ask for the types of sources. I am looking for expertise and interview sources or quotes from doctors who have handled, COVID cases, long COVID cases, for example. The other thing I would say, and I said it earlier, is avoid your own opinion in that first prompt. It's actually very scientific if you think about it. And the way I thought about it from when I first started using it was mathematical, that it's a series of numbers. It's a numbers game. So when you think of prompts as a kind of a mathematical question that you're asking it, I think the output from the beginning will be good, because it is not interpreting or inferring from your opinion that this is what you want. It can't tell. So confident wrongness. So then the next thing is, now that you're clear on what you want, the kinds of sources you want, for example, then you want to talk about who you are. There's an assumption that it's not important when you ask a tool, hey, I want these results. But the reality is that a medical doctor would want something very different from a PhD when they're looking at, a health issue. A student would want something very different from a journalist out in the field. So the AI tool is not going to understand that. Now, they may know a lot about you because you use the tool a lot. For example, ChatGPT, it holds your history, right? So it knows, and then you change your custom settings. But what if what you're doing, the work you want, the press release you're writing or the press release you're reading and trying to analyze, is being done for a client or for an organization? That is why putting in your role is important. And the next is intent. What do you want to happen? So do you want to understand the analysis in terms of numbers and the percentage year over year? The more specific you can be in the first prompt is going to help. And the last one is context. So plausible but wrong specifics. What is the context of this information? Giving it things like, I'm looking at this year, this term range. If you are looking at an outline versus a full, report on certain things too, bullet points, all of those specifics that we wouldn't have to ask Google or Bing or Yahoo, we do in the AI tool from a mathematical perspective. So CCR is prompting framework. It's also a hallucination reduction tool. Basically, by creating that four-part prompt, you can reduce drift, you can reduce that hallucination that we're talking about, and that kind of echo chamber, like, oh yeah, this is what you want, Yumi, kind of approach. So four things: clarity, context, role, and intent. This particular slide will give you even more information on, like, hey, I want a summary, I want a question, role, editor, teacher, context, audience, purpose, and clarity. So here on the left, you can see, tell me about wildfire smoke and health. It will give you lots. It really will. I mean, anything you ask, it will give you lots. And let's say that you get back wildfire smoke contains a mix of particulate matter and gases that can affect respiratory and cardiovascular health. PM 2.5 is the most concerning component. It seems like, wow, I've gotten a lot of good responses here. But take a look if you add these things. Act as a public health reporter who covers wildfire smoke. I'm working for a story about how 2025 wildfire smoke affected outdoor workers, unhoused people, and Bay Area residents. I have AQI data and county records. Identify the three most underreported angles. For each, give me 2 reporting questions and 1 type of source and intent. I'll use this to refine my pitch and prep for source interviews. Don't write copy. Don't name sources unless you can cite them. And what you will get is you will get a much richer response from the beginning. Now, is it the final go-to? Absolutely not. You would still have to check the facts, still ask it to fact check, still use another tool to fact check, all of those things, but it will get you so much closer to it. Here you can see structured, embedded, and natural prose. Act as an environmental health reporter with experience reading toxicology studies. I've obtained a state environmental agency data set showing PFA levels in 47 public water systems, and I'm not a chemist. That last part is incredibly important because now the AI tool understands that it is not going to be speaking like baseball, right? Inside baseball kind of language. The other thing is explain what these levels mean in plain language. Flag which findings are most newsworthy. Using that term will help because it does now understand, all of these tools now understand what journalism is about. They understand the term newsworthy. They didn't in 2023, but they're being trained by journalists now. And which are most ambiguous, and identify 3 questions I should ask a toxicologist. I'm preparing for a phone interview tomorrow morning. Adding that last part, the urgency, is also really, really helpful because when it knows that it is looking for information up to this point and it needs to be, like, so you can have it, it's as opposed to I'm doing a 5-year study where I think the result would be much more expansive. Another one, as a climate science reporter, a new attribution study links last summer's Pacific Northwest heat dome to climate change. I have the paper and the press release. Identify the 3 claims most likely to be misinterpreted by a general reader. And for each one, suggest how I'd verify it independently. I'm preparing follow-up questions for the lead author. Without all of these specific details, who knows what you could get? You could get a 2,000-word report written already for you, which will, again, consume energy, but also not be what you want. So really, again, the more information you can include from the start is going to help you in so many ways. I'm not sure if we have time to do this activity. Let me know.
We have 10 minutes, Yumi, and sometimes I think that like maybe we can do it kind of short just to give people like
Okay.
kind of get
All
in
right.
a little bit.
All
So
right.
yeah, 90 seconds, let's do it.
All right. Okay. So this is the original vague prompt. Write something about heat waves and public health. And so you're going to add, and I'm just going to go back to this chart. So what you want to do is write something about heat waves and public health. That's the original prompt. But what you're going to do is then, what is the topic, scope, and format, right? context, provide background or scenario, audience purpose constraints. And you don't have to answer all of them. You just have to have like one in each of these categories. Role, assign a perspective or voice. So is it an editor, teacher, expert? And the other thing I would add here is if you already know you want this information for a local newsroom, a regional newsroom, an international, that's going to be key. Key. Okay. And then intent. Define the goal or output you want. Do you want a headline? Do you want a summary? Do you want a list of questions? The other thing I don't see here, and I'm going to add, is ask whatever AI tool that you're using. And if you're not, you just create the kind of prompt on paper or on the keyboard or on the screen, which is, I would always say, cite your sources. And again, some places that you use, some Perplexity, for example, always cite sources, but some don't. So I would add that. Take about 60 more seconds. Okay. Would anyone like to share? Okay. Here is an example. Act as a public health reporter covering heat waves in a low income urban community. I'm working on a story about how the 2025 heat dome affected residents without air conditioning. I have health department mortality data and census housing records. Now, if you're using an AI tool as an individual, like I do, because I'm not working for an organization, I don't have an organizational tool. Some people have Microsoft, Microsoft's AI tool, for example. But what I would say is before inputting the data, unless it's already public, which it probably already has, but if it's private to you, then I think it's a conversation that you have with your team, your newsroom, or whoever is involved. Because once you put that data in, while it may not train the LLM, it may be stored. So something to think about. Next is clarity. Identify 3 angles I should pursue. For each, give me the type of source to seek out and one question I should ask my editor before pitching. Intent. I'll use this to refine my pitch. So these are 4 ways that you're kind of breaking down from a mathematical or an analytical or scientific perspective on a prompt that is going to give you better results from the beginning. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. 9:55. CCR travels across beats, so you can really change role, context, clarity, and intent for whatever needs you want. It could be about response, evidence, limitations, and insights. I think the most important thing about this prompt is that you're giving it 4 different ways of looking at the potential solution. You're directing, guiding, and you're saying what I don't want. So 5 things we've covered in this hour. Number 1, AI costs are real, both material and epistemic. Cite ranges, name sources is one way, or ways to help protect yourself and your newsroom. Use AI on the work where being wrong is recoverable, not where being wrong is published. So again, as a first step assistant, first line, the first version, and then you get your team and others to look at it as well. CCR is a structure that you can use to get a better output from the start for the reasons we've talked about. 4, AI is a thinking partner, not a source. And 5, if you only remember one thing, should I be using AI for this at all? That question matters more than any prompt that I can offer and give you. So a little bit details on how to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn, would love to connect. Yeah, stop there, stop sharing and take any. Wow, we didn't have time for questions, do we?
We have 4 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
And there are some good
Okay, I'm going to open up the chat box.
in the chat who actually did some pretty nice prompts. Tommy's looks pretty good. Um,
Oh,
Priya is asking, can we have another session with CCRI for solutions reporting? I think that's like a really good idea. I actually said I can see a follow-up training where there's time to like really think around prompts. So more, but other questions from folks. Please feel free to
uh,
come off of mute as well if you'd like.
There, I just scrolled back. Did we get to answer Dana Schneider's question on cybersecurity for small newsrooms?
We didn't.
Okay, I'll read it for you, Yumi. I already feel behind on cybersecurity for our small newsrooms still using Google Suite products. How can people check the terms and conditions of these tech tools that are making huge promises about what they offer?
they certainly do not make it easy, especially Google. But here's what I do. And this is actually what the Denmark folks, when I interviewed them, did, is they asked ChatGPT or Claude. They said, hey, I want to know the fine print of Google's settings and privacy concerns instead of asking Google, which makes it difficult. Just like Facebook makes it difficult to change settings and understand what it's doing, ask an AI tool, where will I find this information? And you will get results because these AI tools are not working for these companies, and kind of like making sure they're kind of protecting or softballing the answers. Yeah. And the other thing I would say about Google right now, I just saw a story today about Google AI summaries. Has everyone kind of probably seen an AI summary? Um, you know, without getting into too much, but the reality is when you're using a Google product, AI is baked into almost every aspect of these Google products. And so one has to wonder, like, okay, I'm not using AI, but are you? Like, and what does that mean? Where is the information being stored? So that is what I would definitely check out.
We probably have time. Michael, hello, Michael Stoll. You have a question.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. I'm doing
Um,
okay. Nice to hear your voice.
yeah, likewise. So what I would suggest if there is a follow-up session is to do something on agents and workflow,
Oof,
for
yes.
people who are more into it. But I'm wondering because I'm using it really heavily in my research for my investigative reporting, and I found that in the process using Claude Cowork and Codex for ChatGPT, I really had to kind of like create my own workflow systems from scratch using file systems and skills that encode a bunch of these rules ahead of time, so you don't have to keep uploading, keep prompting. That it pulls from your corpus, and your corpus grows over time so that it can think with you. Um, do you do that? And do you know of any really good template kind of file structures and skill databases that investigative reporters use on a daily basis?
First of all, Farah, I would say Michael is the person to do these workflow systems and working with AI agents. Okay, so I have talked to people who are working with agentic AI in some way, but what I have heard from individuals is that creating your own template, creating your own set of structure or kind of systemic wishes, like what you want the tool to do, have been they've worked the best for these particular individuals. Um, I would have to do research around whether templates, I'm sure, I'm just going to say I think they do exist. But for journalists in particular, I haven't seen that. There's also a bit of proprietary kind of concern with newsrooms as they create these systems that are doing the work for them and whether to share them. So that might be part of it. But I will do, I think that's a chapter in the book. So I'm definitely going to look into it. But what I can say about AI agents and what I can say about agentic AI, and do you use like a hard drive, like a mini Mac, to store your data? How do you protect your data?
Oh, me? That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
I'm getting into local LLMs for really sensitive stuff. But I'm not there yet. And I'm just keeping in the back of my mind every time that there's something that could be subpoenaed or
exactly.
stolen by the Trump administration. I want to just think twice.
That's exactly it. Because, you know, for example, the reason why a number of people have moved from open AI to Anthropic, at least the news stories report, is because, you know, the Defense Department wanted access to Anthropic's all of its data, you know, and open AI said, okay. So I just think, where is our data going? You know, I just saw another news story that said ChatGPT was sharing its data with Facebook and Meta. And I'm like, wait a minute, Meta. And I'm like, I don't know. I just think when we put our information out into the world, we cannot be assured that it's going where we don't think it's going. And that's one of the reasons why I've actually pulled back from agentic AI. I know I could buy a mini Mac and that's how people are doing it, but I still think there are a number of cases where these AI agents have deleted people's emails. They have gone rogue, doing what you don't want them to do. I just think we're still in the refinement period. So I would have to do more research to properly answer your question, but I'm really glad to hear you're in that space and I would love to hear more about it.
Great. So Yumi, we're 2 minutes over. We've got people
Okay.
leaving. But thank you so much, Yumi, for this great training. And as I said in the chat, this is just the beginning. We will take in all the ideas. And thank you all so much for your time and your focus today. And thank you, Ethan, for setting